Hello, everybody. Great to have you on the Code Breakers podcast, and I'm super excited. I've just been chatting with our next guest because he's been a good friend of mine for many years. As a matter of fact, we tried to figure out one of the last times we were talking how many years we've known each other, and we can't quite figure it out, but it's been a long time, maybe 20 years or maybe even more than that. But this is really a remarkable human being that you're going to meet today. He's somebody that started off on a remarkable path already. He went to a really great school, Colgate University, got out of Colgate and got a great job in a awesome accounting firm and did that for a couple of years and decided that he wanted something a little bit different and probably shocked his parents and shocked his boss and shocked most people that knew him because he decided he wanted to become a Navy SEAL. And so if you know anything about Navy SEALs, it's one of the toughest, hardest, grimiest occupations on the planet. So he's got this cush office where, and he'll talk more about it, where he's an accountant on his way up in a big firm, becoming a partner. And he leaves all that behind to probably make less money, right, Mark? Less money. But also to live a more challenging life. And so he did that. He did it extremely well. We'll talk more about that. And then he went on to become really a very successful business person. He's had several successful businesses, from restaurants to he's got a company called SEALFIT and many other things. And he's a best-selling author. He's written the books, The Way of the SEAL, Staring Down the Wolf, Unbeatable Mind, and I'm sure he's got more books on the way. But hey, Mark, welcome to the podcast. It's really great to have you on.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. Code Breaker is going to be a huge success. I'm so super stoked to be part of this.
Yeah, thanks. So listen, I know you've told your story probably a million times, but to me, it's still remarkable. Take people back to what the heck was going through your mind when you decided you wanted to leave the cushy environment and go into this environment where they literally were going to challenge you to step up bigger than you've ever stepped up before in your life. Like, what happened? What was going on in you that made you want to do that?
Wow. I'll try to articulate this without taking up, the whole 45 minutes or hour here. So the job was cushy. Yes. I never looked at myself as an accountant, Tom. I graduated with an economics major from Colgate. And then I got this job really because I didn't know what the hell else to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I was brought up with a family in a small town in rural upstate New York. My father had a legacy business that had been around since like 1880, started by his grandfather. So it was called Devine Brothers, my namesake. And all the men in the family always worked at Devine Brothers. So that's but that is what I was conditioned for.
Your dad was expecting that out of you,
there
right?
Was an expectation. And it wasn't explicitly stated, but what was kind of subtly transmitted was there wasn't really anything else that was worthy of the Devine family. Right? Except for my mom thought being a doctor was pretty cool. And so actually I kind of briefly explored that. I went to Colgate as a pre-med actually, and that lasted for half a semester. That story would take too long to get into, but I tucked my tail between my leg and bailed from that and went into economics because, it was A, easier, and B, more in alignment with that subtle programming of I'm going to, basically go into business and go back to the family business. However, as I neared the end of my 4 years at Colgate, I kind of had this idea that, I don't want to just go right back to the family business. I need to get out and see the world a bit. And all my friends were applying for and getting these great jobs down in New York City, with Goldman Sachs and, these big investment firms. So I looked at them and I had a few interviews and unfortunately, my grades were not a huge priority at Colgate. My priorities were sports, beer, and women. and the rankings, would alternate which one was most important, usually depending on whether sports were in season or not.
Yeah.
So I had like a 2.85 average. So I wasn't getting any offers or any nibbles. But this one firm called Coopers and Lybrand, now they saw something in me that the others didn't. And they were, they were Big Eight consulting and
very prestigious firm. Yeah,
very
absolutely.
prestigious now. Well, they were prestigious then, but now it's PricewaterhouseCoopers. They merged with Pricewaterhouse. The recruiting agent there saw something in me. He saw a well-rounded student. And it turns out there was a reason for this. They were recruiting at Ivy League and lower Ivy. Colgate, lower Ivy doesn't really exist, but they consider it a small group of smaller colleges that has some of the same characteristics as the Ivy. And they were looking for non-accounting majors who could come in and be more well-rounded. And they would teach them, they would go send us to NYU Business School, Stern School of Business, to get a master's in accounting. So we would learn the technical skills, but they're looking for character. And they wanted people who had the character to be more well-rounded partners someday, so that these firms could operate, more effectively in the business environments of the future and not just be run by accountants. Yeah. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And so here I was, Colgate didn't even have an accounting class, and, and I'm getting hired by this big accounting firm. And there were like 75 of us that the Big Eight firms participated in this. We went together to NYU as a cohort. It was a very cool program. Yeah. One of my best friends from Colgate, fraternity brother, got hired by a company called Ernst & Whinney, Arthur Young merged with Ernst & Whinney, became EY. He's currently the CEO.
Wow.
EY. Yeah. One of my best friends. And so the program worked, right? Yeah. For a very small number, a very tight number of those who got hired went on to the highest positions in those organizations, but not me. So I did what you said. I went in and I went to school. That was like a summers full-time. During the fall, spring semester, we worked full-time and went to school in the evening. And 18 months later, I had a master's in accounting, but I deferred that into the MBA program and ended up within 4 years, I got my MBA in finance from Stern, and I sat for and passed the CPA exam. So I became an MBA CPA. Well, to make a long story short, though I found the academic part interesting and challenging, and I also enjoyed the variety of work experience, going from client to client to client, and I really couldn't stand the accounting part, right? I couldn't stand that work. It was just not a good fit for me. Yeah. And furthermore, because I had that stark contrast of not only not liking that work, but I started to really dislike being stuck in an office. I disliked the attitude of a lot of the people I was working with, not necessarily my peers, but I was working with financial services companies. So my clients were like Drexel, Burnham, Lambert. The litany of clients don't even exist anymore. Solomon Brothers, Drexel, Burnham, Payne Weber. Yeah. Right. And I was thinking that I was going to go into that path instead of stay into go become a partner at Price Waterhouse. I was going to go make a shit ton of money. But then I started to really get turned off by their attitude. Yeah. It was very arrogant, and ego was rampant. Yeah. And it all, your worth as a human being was tied up in how much you made. And I, compared to them, I wasn't making anything. Yeah. And so my whole self-esteem started to be kind of challenged, and I had to step back from that. And what allowed me to step back was I was an athlete, a pretty hardcore athlete in college, as you know. And I also was an adventurer kind of outside, because I grew up in the wilderness, upstate New York. My household was somewhat tumultuous, and so I would spend a lot of time outdoors. And so being out in nature and running through the trails, the Adirondacks and whatnot became my solace. And so when I got to New York, I really was unwilling to let that go. That was the warrior in me saying, the warrior and the athlete means, it was part of my character by then. It was burned so deeply into my character that I wasn't willing to just pretend that was one phase of my life and now I'm in this other phase. So I put my suit on every day, and day by day, my body goes into decline.
Locked up into an office. Yeah. When you're an outdoor guy. Yeah. I can't even imagine you in an office that long. That's crazy. Yeah.
Right. It was horrible. So I designed this training program where I woke up at 5 and I went for a 6-mile run and did my morning routine. And then at lunch, when everyone else went to their high carb, lunch with usually a martini or a beer, I went to the gym and banged out what is now called a high intensity workout. Back then it was just get as much done as I can in 30 minutes because I had to get back to the office.
Yeah.
And then I had this 2-hour block of time between when they let me off from work because they had to, because it was part of a joint work study program, and my coursework starting down at NYU, which at that time was the World Trade Center. And I'm like, great, that's another training block. And so I was trying to figure out, what do I want to do in the training block? I've already got my run in, I've got the gym time in. And I thought, well, I think a martial art would be very cool. And I didn't really have the opportunity to study martial art in the small town that I grew up, but I did see and observe some of that at Colgate. So I looked for a martial art, and lo and behold, I found one right next to my apartment on 23rd Street. And it was the World Sado Karate headquarters. And I went into this, and I remember it as clear as if it was yesterday. There was Mr. Tadashi Nakamura, a diminutive but just boulder of a man.
Yeah.
Standing in the middle of the floor teaching this black belt class. And he had like 60 black belts in the class. And this guy was different than anyone I'd ever seen or had ever experienced before. So I joined. I said, whatever he is doing, and his presence and these.
Yeah, presence. Yeah, you felt his presence. Yeah.
I felt it was really different. He was intense. He was simultaneously stern and spontaneously hilarious, and had a huge open heart, but nobody would, and everyone respected the heck out of this guy.
Yeah.
And it turns out that he was a Zen master alongside being the founder of this martial art. And so we did a little bit of meditation before and after every class, but I learned pretty quickly that he also had a Zen class that senior students could attend on Thursday nights. And I asked if I could join this class, and he said, okay, sure. He only had, like, out of the hundreds of thousands of students he had worldwide, there were like 10 or 11 people in this class.
Wow.
And this is 1985.
And that's amazing that you got in there, but all you had to do was really ask, right? Ask with the right intention, and he felt something. That's cool. Most people wouldn't have asked. Like, he would never. Yeah, that's cool. I
learned in college that if you don't intend and ask, then nothing happens. Right?
Yeah.
And so I said, my intention was to train. I asked him, he said yes. I took it seriously, and so he kept me in the program. So that's what started for me a lifelong passion with meditation. And now we know how powerful that is, especially for a 21-year-old individual, to take up meditation when your brain is still developing, accelerates certain fundamental changes, or prevents deeply rutted patterns from rutting even deeper, which is what happened in my place. So I was still in this place where I was able to kind of question and wonder, and I hadn't established some of the fixed mindset features that really kind of become established in the mid-20s, right? When all those thought structures really kind of take hold and firm up. So meditation, I remember experiencing a lot of the typical frustrations that people experience, but because I respected Nakamura so much, and he had some concise instruction for us. So I had weekly contact, weekly instruction, and a team to train with, this small group of people. There was a lot of stickiness for me, right? I didn't want to let them down. I didn't want to let him down, which taught me later the power of a team, which was reinforced in the SEAL teams. The power of learning how to focus on one thing and stick to it. So I stuck with it, and my brain, I think, started to change. My subjective experience of life started to change. I was able to see more. I was able to ask different questions. I was able to gain some, perspective on my life. And that perspective showed me clearly that I was a complete misfit in this current job.
Yeah.
And so I started to look for something that was going to be in alignment with, really my growing internal sense of purpose and clarity around who I was, and all coming from sitting on that meditation bench.
Yeah. So I get that point where you start to do that, but how the heck did you decide the Navy SEALs is what I'm going to become? That one. And by the way, how did you explain that to your dad, who who was already disappointed you didn't come into the family business. Like, okay, well, at least he's a big 8 accountant. No, Dad, I'm going to become a Navy SEAL. Yeah. That must have been an interesting conversation.
Yeah, it was beyond interesting. Yeah. The process had me really, it sent me into an existential crisis. So you could say I had kind of my first midlife crisis at 21, going into 22 years old, because it became pretty clear to me that I wasn't cut out to be a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers or going into finance. And also I didn't want to go back to this family business. So I'm like, what the hell am I supposed to be doing right now?
Yeah.
I know I know what is not inspiring. I know what is not aligned with what I'm starting to feel as my internal calling, but what is aligned with that?
Yeah.
And so that was really powerful, Tom, because it taught me, first of all, that when you open up to your calling or your purpose, it's not a career. It's not a job. It's not any really doing thing. That comes later, right? Yeah. That's part of aligning with your calling. But the calling is much more of an archetypal energy. But what kept coming to me was warrior. You're a warrior. You're a warrior. And I was like, well, am I a warrior as an accountant? Am I supposed to take down the corrupt white collar? It's like, that didn't inspire me, right? That wasn't quite it. And when I asked what type of warrior am I, and I started to, tap into my visualization skills, I kept seeing that I was meant to be a warrior and a leader in kind of in gnarly, dangerous situations, that I was supposed to mix it up and use my physical aptitude, my sense of adventurism, my high risk tolerance as a leader and a warrior. And so I had that epiphany. I was like, oh, interesting. And right around the time that really kind of solidified in me, I was walking home from work one night, or the dojo, I don't remember which at this point. And I walked past a Navy recruiting office, and there in the window, I saw a poster, and the title of the poster was Be Someone Special. And it had images of Navy SEALs doing really cool stuff.
Yeah.
It didn't say anything about the US Navy SEALs. It just said US Navy. Right.
Yeah.
And I had only vaguely heard of the SEALs. I didn't know anything about them, but I looked at that poster. I just stood transfixed for 20, 30 minutes. I was like, wow, that's it. That spoke to me. And so when I was clear about my purpose, then the path to fulfilling that purpose revealed itself to me. And that's
and that's so interesting too, because people are thinking it's going to be, something probably more profound than that. But literally, your mind knew you had programmed it through your meditation and through your frustration and the existential crisis to look for something. And you knew warrior, and now it was on the alert, and it sees a poster.
Yeah, it was literally a sign.
You sit there for like 20, 30 minutes, which is hard to imagine someone really saying it. But that really is sometimes how it is. Like, I had an existential crisis a little bit older. I think it was maybe 23. Maybe 24, but I was working for a Wall Street firm. I was frustrated. Had been in a relationship that had ended, so I didn't really have any geographical reason to stay where I was on the East Coast. And I'm watching TV, and I see Tony Robbins on TV in the morning, and I'm like, and he talks about his book, and I read his book, and I was frustrated. My mind was looking for something, and then a couple months later, I'm moving out to California, and everyone thought I was crazy. But it's interesting how that happens. That's such a cool story, what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's a prototypical hero's journey. Mm-hmm. This is not comfortable, right? Transformation, like the chrysalis, like it's very uncomfortable to come out of the cocoon and to challenge the story that you're living. And the assumptions that you took to be real. And those stories are framed and fed us by our families and our culture and even our language.
Sure.
So that becomes what I call your background of obviousness. It's all there. It's like the subroutine and the programming. It's all there, but it's not obvious to you until you step out of yourself and look back into that background. And you see, holy shit, look at that. Yeah. Look at all the programming, it's like we live the computer graphical interface, but behind it is all the software programming. So all that programming is there, and meditation pulls your perspective back even further to where now you can see the code. It's like the Matrix. You can see the code of the programming. You're not on the other side of the graphical user interface anymore. You're inside and you can see the code. And it's profound because you can start to analyze that code and be like, wow, that's not who I am. That's not what my spirit is telling me I am. That's all programmed. So then you can begin to deconstruct that. And that becomes very uncomfortable because then you have to look at, like, for my case, man, I got this job. I've already invested countless hours into this MBA, CPA. I've got countless hours into this career path, all built upon this story that I was going to get all this great experience and these credentials, and then, come back when I'm 30 or so to go, lead the business into the future, the family business in the future. And all that story basically has a lot of an emotional component, a cognitive, intellectual component. It's got the social structural component to it of expectations of the family, your peers, et cetera, et cetera. So you, as a hero, you go on this journey of self-awareness, self-discovery, and you discover that those stories and the structures that you built and that the edifice that you've stood upon to this point is completely wrong for you, and you have to disassemble it. Then you're staring into the abyss of the unknown.
Yeah.
It's very
Which is scary for most people, but it's such a beautiful time in their lives when they look back at it and they go, wow, that's what shaped me. So you see this poster.
You have to go through the discomfort to get to the other side, because that's what leads you to recognize, this is the real issue here, is that I lack certain skills and I lacked some fundamental perspectives. And so I can find a mentor. I can learn new things. I can, I'm not lost if I deconstruct the old. I can simultaneously replace it, with bridges to new learning, new perspectives.
Yeah.
And so, you find mentors and you start to shift your focus in the direction you need to go and not the direction that you were going. And that focus brings more synchronicity into your life, more teaching, more knowledge, more books, more courses like Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
I found Tony too. And he helped me develop self-confidence, right? And gave me some new distinctions. And I found other thought leaders like Brian Tracy. And, just like you, I just listened to their cassette tapes over and over, and read their books. And that started to give me more bridges to the future. And then suddenly you break through to this new terrain, and the new terrain starts to feel more comfortable. You haven't mastered it yet, but now you're not a novice, nor is it a complete unknown anymore. You've got some familiarity.
Yeah.
And the other part about that, which is really cool from my experience, is you can do a lot of that work internally.
Yes.
With imagery. And with, just
and let's talk about that too. Yeah, let's talk about that, because I want you to tell the story. So you see the poster, now all of a sudden, okay, Navy SEALs, and then you find out that it's pretty hard to get into the Navy, even get into the qualification process if you're not already in the Navy. And so they say there's only 2 out of the 2 each class or something like that. 2 a year. So most people say, oh, okay, maybe it's not that. You didn't do that. And you really started carving into your mind. I have this process we call see it, feel it, believe it. But take people through the process you did mentally. You did a lot of work in here that you believe allowed you to be one of those 2 people chosen. And obviously somebody who ended up becoming a Navy SEAL. But what did you do inside? Because a lot of work can be done inside.
That's right. Well, I think everything ultimately is done inside, and then it's just expressed in your actions. And so,
I say everything's created twice: first inside, then outside.
That's right. Yeah. First, a decision needs to be made, right? And so I did nothing except equivocate and go back and forth and wonder what it would be like if I made this decision or that decision, and fret about what my parents would think and everything. And finally, when I got through all of that, which took literally months, and most people at that point, that's the resistance. That's the hero going out and meeting all that resistance. Yeah. And most people, or a lot of people, then fall back because the resistance seems insurmountable.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, there's a million excuses I could have latched onto that were very valid. that have kept me on that original path. But I was, something in me was strong enough to push back against the resistance. And finally, after one meditation session, and I was riding the subway home, and I had this, like, I was just so deep in this meditation that it stayed with me, off the bench. And I felt like this incredibly intense flow state and connection while I was on the subway riding home. And in that moment, like, something came to me and said, just effing do it. Stop screwing around. Right? This is your path.
Yeah.
So I was in a very open state. My heart was open, everything was open, and I heard the voice much louder. It wasn't like, oh, this could be a path, or this is a potentially, a potential future of yours, Mark. It's like, this is it. Get off your ass and make the decision.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I made the decision. Okay.
Yeah.
So once a decision is made, everything shifts.
Yep.
Everything. Because, you back to talking about focus. Prior to that, my focus was split between doing my job, but hating it, and trying to figure out what the hell else to do, but being non-committal about it.
Yeah.
And now I made the decision. And now my commitment 100% shifts to becoming a Navy SEAL, to being a Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
So that shifted my physical training, right? So instead of just training to stay in shape, now I'm training to be a Navy SEAL. So I made immediate adjustments to my physical training plan based upon my research. And it also shifted my mental training, because I already had I already was pretty early in the game of knowing that training the mind and training the body were equally as important. And so my mental training game included this meditation practice, but also a practice of breath work and visualization. And this is back in like I said, early 1980, 85 to 86, 87. So my practice shifted to where at the end of I did a breathing practice, then went into my meditation as I had learned it back then with Zen. And that took about 20 minutes. And at the end, I would sit and use imagery. And so now all my imagery shifted, instead of like wondering, examining different scenarios, to like creating an image, a moving image of me going through Navy SEAL training and graduating.
Nice. So you saw yourself months before you'd ever been accepted, graduating. That's so critical. That's what I do with athletes too. Yeah.
Not months before I started training in SEAL training, but months before I was even, you're right, accepted into the Navy.
Right.
9 months before, to be exact.
Yeah. It was a total, you know what? And that's the thing. It was a total fantasy at that point in time, but it wasn't a fantasy to you.
No.
You believed it. And that's the hard part, Mark. Most people will not ever allow themselves to believe in anything they can't touch or feel or read that it's already been done. You bridge that gap, and it's that gap that you need to bridge to be great in life.
That's
right.
I
love it. Yeah.
And your little formula there, see it, feel it, believe it. I would say see it, say it, feel it, believe it. And so I could see it. I could talk to myself about it. It felt right. And so I believed it. And you're right.
Hold on 1 second. So were you able to see it, say it, feel it, believe it right away? Or did you have to start carving into your mind that, and then eventually you really, really had it at that level where was your truth?
The answer is yes. But if you had said right then in let's say month 1.
Yeah.
If we were having this interview, you would say, Mark, you can see this? Yes. And do you feel like it's true? Yes. Do you believe it? I would say yes. But compared to the belief that came across me 9 months later, it's like a world apart. And so you're right. That was me in a fantasy world, fantasizing, imagining, and self-talking myself into a, very early stages of a belief system, right? Internal.
And how long did you do that? Was it 9 months you did that? Literally just working inside before you even got the notice that you got accepted?
Yes. 9 months.
Wow.
Is
that's
from when I made that decision. Because you're right, you mentioned earlier that the Navy only takes 2. a year in through the officer candidate, which is from civilian directly into the SEALs.
Yeah.
All the other 20 candidates or so from the officer cadre come through the Naval Academy or reserve officer training. So they're already in the Navy.
Yeah.
Or they come from the enlisted corps, transitioning over as a senior combat effective vet.
Yeah.
Or in operator. Most SEALs are enlisted, so every year of the let's see, 750 or so trainees who start training, maybe 650 are enlisted and 100 are officer candidates.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so each of the 5 classes might have 20 officers and the rest,
Yeah.
100, 140 or 160 or so. I don't know the numbers exactly. They differ per class too. So my recruiter basically was trying to talk me out of it. He was like, Mark, this is not for you. It's like, there's ridiculously small chances. There's thousands of candidates. And I said, no, I hear what you're saying, but I'm doing this because one of those 2 slots is mine.
Nice. I love that.
And so, yeah, there might have been a little arrogance there. And I admit there probably was. But when I sat down every day and visualized it and greased the groove of that energy of I've got this. So the dialogue was really important, because I talked to myself as if I had already become a Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
The imagery was future state. It wasn't me doing my training today. It was me doing SEAL training in some future point in time that was unknown, but it was, a year or 2 away. I mean, I felt that I was actually doing it and that it had already come alive and that I was doing it in that future state and succeeding at a high level. And every day I did this just on blind faith, right?
And you did it every day, which is the key. Like most people go, hey, I've done it a month. Where's my notice? Why am I not in yet? But you did it 9 months, which is really incredible.
Just like physical training, consistency is key.
Yeah.
It's way better to do 1 minute of visualization every day than an hour on Sunday. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so here's what happened to me is I started getting more and more confident. But then there was a moment where suddenly everything changed. Right. And I remember this so clearly where it wasn't any one session, but over the course of like 3 days, I had this overwhelming sense come over me that it had already been accomplished.
Wow.
That like it was my destiny. It wasn't a fantasy anymore. It wasn't a wish. It's not a desire. It's a destiny. And that's when I got the call from the recruiter. And he's like, Mark, you're not going to believe this. You got one of the billets. You know what I mean? Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was incredible. And I even literally my shadow side tried to even torpedo this. Like my ego tried to torpedo it. I came from, I don't think I've ever told you the story or I certainly haven't told many people this, but we'll talk about it here because I think transparency these days is critical.
Yeah.
But I had a seriously alcoholic, dysfunctional family, beautiful people, right? They're all that, right? They're all that. And a lot of listeners understand what I'm talking about. Like, and so there's a lot of alcohol and abuse in my family. And so I had that trail me into the Navy, where I just didn't recognize that when I drank, I overdrank. And that eventually it would catch up to me and get me in trouble. And I didn't recognize that because, like a lot of hardcore, hard charging, young, 20-something years old, I could go out Friday night and or Thursday night through Sunday night, and pound it and get up and run it off and, be fine. Yeah. So anyways, this is kind of ironic. I went to the medical processing center, like within this first month after getting accepted or not getting, but getting one of the billets. Or no, in order to get the billet, I had to go through this process. So I hadn't gotten accepted, but I had to go through MEPS, they call it. And I had partied the night before, Friday night. And I guess I had partied hard because I show up in MEPS. The first thing they do is give you a little, breathalyzer test. I didn't know that. And so I'm ignorantly blow into this thing and it blew like positive.
The day after you drank so much, even the day after.
I was up until like 1 or 2 in the morning,
Yeah.
with my bros, It's just, and I look back at it and I'm just like, "God, what were you thinking?" I was completely ignorant. And guy said, "Turn around and walk out of here. You just disqualified yourself
Mm.
for 6 months,
Wow.
And so I said, "Oh, damn. Well, this is 1987. They have another MEP station up near Syracuse, which is close to where I, you know, used to live, close to Colgate even. And I was down in New York City at the time. So these people, they can't possibly be networked and talk to each other.
Well, back in those days, they probably weren't, right?
They
There's
weren't.
no
This is
internet. Yeah.
pre-internet, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So I go and I make an appointment at MEPS in Syracuse, and I go up there and I of course pass the physical screening test with flying colors. And I think, okay, man, clever little Mark, you solved that one, you clever little monkey, you. And so I'm sitting at my desk a couple weeks later, and I get a call from the recruiter,
Yeah.
and his name was Nick, Lieutenant Nick Philippone. What a great guy. And he says, "Hey, Mark, how you doing?" I said, "Good, Nick. Any news?" Because this is early in the game. I thought it was going to be really quick to get that billet. He says, "No news, no news." There's silence. Then he goes, "You got any news for me?" I said, "Nope." He goes, "Okay, keep me posted." And I hung up, and I just had that feeling right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeez, he knows something.
Oh
Yeah.
man, he knows. And I breathed into it, and I said, "Okay, I got to call him back." So I called him back and said, "Nick." He goes, "Hey, Mark, how's it going?" I said, "I'm good, but I wasn't being entirely truthful with you."
Hmm.
He says, I went up to MEPS in Syracuse to take the MEPS there. He goes, "Yeah, I know." And he goes, "If you hadn't called me back, I would have disqualified you." He
Wow.
goes, "But the Navy SEALs need sneaky little bastards like you, so I'm going to let this one go."
That's awesome. Yeah, no, you never have told me that story. That's a great one. I love that. I love that. Well, but also like you're at some level, something inside of you was guiding you to call him back. Like most people would have never called him back. And then, hey, why am I not in? So you had it so ingrained in you that I believe anyways, there was some force beyond our conscious mind guiding you to
That's
call
right.
him back. Right.
And
And
that's a
also what a
good
great lesson in your life too.
It was a tremendous lesson from a lot of different levels. The alcohol not being, notwithstanding, that was like outer level, but also the power of integrity,
Yeah.
the power of immediately rectifying something that you feel is wrong,
I
right?
love
Not
that.
not letting that slide and turn into a regret, or
Yeah.
losing an opportunity, but you're not sure why. But if you could trace it back, oh, there's a moment where you could have changed the outcome just
Yeah.
with a simple action like a phone call.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. Intuition, there's a lot of different ways that shows up. It's like your internal guidance system of your spirit
Yeah.
saying, "You
Yeah.
idiot, your ego just just made the wrong choice. So do
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
or else you're going to be led down the wrong path. So do
Yeah.
this, take this action." And I learned to listen to that early. It actually saved my life many times in the SEALs. And
Wow.
I credit my ability to listen to that intuition also to meditation,
Yeah.
not only because it aligned me with my calling / purpose, but because of that internal focus, that systematic daily focus inwardly, taught me how to listen for those signals,
Yeah.
and to be able to begin to make sense of them. And that's a long process as well.
Well, and you and I want to get into the story that you learned from the Navy SEALs, and I'm gonna have to have you back another time because there's so much more I want to talk to you about. But the Navy SEALs are thought of as like grit, grind through, go for it, which there's a lot of that, and I know other Navy SEALs that probably never did meditate, right? They never had that intuition. They were
Most
just,
didn't. When I was the only one in my class.
yeah. I mean, they're hard chargers, which is great, which gets you through a lot of situations. But you just said it was that meditation, that ability to connect within, to get signals that you just don't see with your eyes and you don't hear with your ears. that saved your life several times, which is really interesting. That's what I love about you. You are that warrior. You've done the toughest stuff imaginable in terms of, getting through the trainings that very few people get through, but you've got that other side that I think is just as powerful in you as your ability to grind and be this physical giant. You are a mental giant. You're an emotional giant. You lead with your heart, which I really love too. So take us through, because you talk about story. And one of the things that I've always admired about the SEALs is what they do over the course of the qualification process is they ingrain a story within the right people. Not everybody accepts the story because they can ring the bell and go, hey, I'm not buying this anymore, I'm leaving. But those that make it through create a story within them that allows them to expand who they are and physically accomplish things that they never would have thought possible before. Take us through that story that you learned from the SEALs, and even just what was going through your head as you're grinding through, because everybody, Mark may not say this because he's a very humble guy, but he not only was one of the few that made it through his class, but he was the number one person in his class, the honors person in his class. So take us through that time, because everybody has their own, not to the physical extent that a Navy SEAL goes through, but everybody has those journeys in their life where it's super tough and they don't think they can make it either physically or mentally. And some people give up. Some people, just never ever go for anything big again in life. But other people, they keep going through. They have that fortitude and that grit. What's the Navy SEAL training like as you look back at it now? Like, what is the story that really, and there's lots of little sayings I know that you guys have, but what's the real story that you got from that looking back now that can apply to anybody?
Yeah, such a great question. 80% of those who start SEAL training don't graduate.
And they're already highly qualified, like they're fit and
They're
everything.
highly
They just don't make
qualified,
it through. Yeah.
and 80% of those who enroll to become Navy SEALs don't even make it to training.
Mm.
And so now you're talking about, less than 20% actually start training. And of that 20% of hardcore young men who want to be SEALs, of the 20% who can start training, only 20% of those graduate. And so there's something about, the tiny percentage. What's 20% of 20%?
I don't even know. You're the accountant. Come on, you should know that number.
I know there's a reason I'm not an
Is
accountant.
it 4%? Is it something like 4% or
yeah.
less than that? Yeah. Okay.
Something like that. It's like 4% or point. I don't even know. Someone
Yeah.
can give us the math. There's something that they're doing differently.
Yeah.
And I don't think, and most of the SEAL instructors would tell you that it's not the SEAL training that teaches you to be different.
Mm-hmm.
You already have that.
Mm.
SEAL training is designed to cut out the second 80%.
Mm.
The first 80% is cut out through things like the physical training requirements, medical,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
inability to get waivers, competition with your peers, just on all statistics. The second part is demonstration. So BUDS is basic underwater demolition SEAL training. But, having said that, I went in there with an attitude that I was going to be a Navy SEAL because I'd already won it in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that the instructors were not obstacles, that the only way they could possibly get me out of the training was to kill me. And I was pretty sure that that was against the rules. Right. And so that was like mindset rule number one was I've already made this.
Mm-hmm.
I just need to navigate the next 9 months. Right.
Yeah.
And now there's strategies on how to navigate something really hard like that. And I'll get into that,
Yeah.
but I've already got this. I will be there at the end.
Yeah.
And everything standing in my way, mainly the instructors and the challenges that they put in front of me, are just opportunities for me to learn and to grow.
Yeah. I love that. That is so cool. It's like taking something that could be say that's unfair. I shouldn't be treated this way. You flip the script in your own mind right from the beginning. You say, "Hey, anything they do to me, they yell at me, they do something that I think is BS. It's
Right.
just an opportunity for me to grow." I love that. That is so cool. That's something
And
anybody can apply.
in fact, you could almost, and I took it to the next level. I said, you could almost look at this as a gimme, right? It's actually easier than a lot of other situations because it's a controlled environment, right? This is it's a governmental institution, Navy SEALs. Yeah, it's challenging, but it's a controlled environment. They're not actually trying to kill you. They're trying to, meter out those who don't have the resiliency and the mental toughness or the team ability to succeed. So that I got that going for me. And two, other people have done it before. And if even only one person has done it before, then I know I can do it. It's kind of like the 4-minute mile. Once Bannister did it, or whatever his name was, then it just started. Other people just started doing it. Right. So other people had done this before. And all I needed to do was remember that, because if they can do it, then I can do it.
Wow.
Right?
Awesome.
So those were all there. And I kind of went in with that attitude. But then what did I learn? So I had a pretty solid sense that I was physically capable of a lot, but I hadn't been nearly challenged, to the level that I knew I would be. And so the physical challenge combined with the mental and emotional challenge of the training, lots of, long days, sleep deprivation, nonstop training, sometimes around the clock, especially Hell Week, which was 6 days, 7 days of hell, 7 days of nonstop training with literally 1 4-hour block of sleep on Thursday when we started on Sunday.
Wow.
All of that taught me that the human being is capable of like radically more than we are led to believe by our social conversation and our families. And so now, fast forward 9 months and 80% of the 80% are gone. And I'm left with 19 guys out of 185. I'm one of 19. My entire boat crew was standing there with me. So 7 of the 19 was my team, because we were doing things a little bit different. Like we all adopted. I guess it's infectious, my language, my dialogue, the way I showed up was infectious. My team, I was their leader. I talked to them this way, like we're talking here. I made it clear that we're in this together. It's a team effort, that I'm not going anywhere. And my job is to get them through the training. And then they adopted their job is to get us through the training. And so this team became unbreakable,
Nice.
And so 7 of the 19 were my team. And so, but I knew that these 19 men, and they do allow women to try now, and there haven't been any yet. Someday, I believe there'll be a female Navy SEAL, and then some more. But then, back then, and certainly even to this day, it was all men because of the standards. These guys have accomplished things that are just so extraordinarily out of the norm that my level of trust in them was through the roof.
Yeah.
And so this was the beginning of the SEAL training. Besides your little boat crew, it's largely individual. Like they don't, if someone's screwing up in a boat crew, the boat crew can't say, no, don't make him, or don't take him out of our training. We'll take care of it, or we'll cover her. You can't do that. Right. Whereas, when you're in combat, if you have someone who has a bad day, everyone's life is on the line. And so you cover for him, you figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in SEAL training, it's all about the individual. But if you can learn that eventually, once you get out, it's all going to be about the team.
Yeah.
Then you have this second multiplier effect. The first multiplier effect is the self-awareness that you're capable of far more. I call that 20x factor. You're capable of at least 20 times what you thought you were capable of. And then once you learn that new territory, then you can go another 20x and then another, and there's no limit actually.
I love it. Hey, I love what you're saying. I want to stop right there because a lot of people think, okay, 20x physical, and I can do more pull-ups or run farther. That's one aspect, but you're talking about in business, you're talking about everything. 20x more happiness, like whatever it is you want.
Everything.
There's way more that you're capable of, which is what the Code Breakers is about, is breaking that code so you can really experience more. So when you're listening to Mark talk, don't just think Navy SEALs. This is a concept he lives his whole life by.
That's right. That's right. It becomes a new paradigm that you're capable of 20 times more. Just what do you want to focus on?
Yeah.
Apply that belief system and then apply the second leverage point, which is the power of your team.
Yeah.
Right. Because, yes, individually, I'm capable of 20 times more than individually I could accomplish. But you bring a team around you of other individuals who have the same mindset. It's like a geometric explosion, right? It's 20 times 20. Now we're getting back into, math here. So we want 400 times more. I can do that. Anyways, that was incredibly powerful for me. So the power of that exponential capacity that comes from a team that has this expansive mindset of almost anything's possible. That's what I learned from the SEALs. That's the most valuable nugget.
Well, and the interesting thing was, like you said, your entire boat crew made it all the way through to the end. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what are the chances that you randomly just got 7 of the top 19? Probably very, very low. There was a dynamic that you helped create through your belief system that got transmitted, and you probably fed off them at times too, right? But you transmitted sometimes verbally, but sometimes just the way they saw when you were standing or the way you handled something. And then you not only rose up for yourself, but people around you rose up too. And that's one of the beautiful things about life. As we all break through our limitations and we succeed, we become those people that can rise the tide for all ships out there. Like you, I don't look for, okay, I'm in a situation, what happens to the average person? I never look for that. I don't want, if I got sick, with some disease, I don't want to go, okay, what are the common things that happen for someone? Screw that. I'm going to say, who had it that got better the quickest, and then study that person's belief system. But I love how you got your whole team through, dude. That's just amazing how you didn't just keep it within you, but this is the ability that every single human being has. And I think the responsibility every single human being has to create a breakthrough in their life, don't do it just for you.
Right.
Do it for all those people that are counting on you to feed off you. And there's so many people that need us to do what you did with that boat crew.
Right. And that was probably my first profound experience in leadership. And it wasn't what most people think. It wasn't that I had the answers. It wasn't that I was the best one at everything. But what I did was just humbly show up every day and put out. I put out for myself to prove that I could do a better than competent job at everything. Right. I didn't have to be the master at anything, but I could be good enough at everything. So this is important, right? Because one of your principles is focus. Now, my focus was on leading this team.
Yeah.
But in order to lead the team, I had to be competent in all the areas they expected me to be competent at. And they didn't expect me to be the best shooter, the best jumper, the best diver, the best demolition expert. In fact, if I put too much of my time trying to be the best at any one of those, I would have lost credibility with the team.
Yeah.
But I had to be good enough to hold my own so that I wouldn't hold the team back.
Yeah.
Something about the SEALs that's unique is that officers operate alongside their teammates. Mm-hmm. We don't hide in the office and send them out to operate. You know what I mean? We're not on the phone in the rear echelon. We're right out in front with them. So I had to be able to operate just like them. But at the same time, my job was leadership. And so when I came in and I didn't know anything about leadership, the only thing I could figure out was how to help my team. How can I help my team? How can I remove obstacles? How can I show them through my own actions how to do something?
Yeah.
How can I get out of the way and let the team lead when they were stronger than I was? Right? How could I serve them? And so it wasn't exactly servant leadership. In fact, criticism of servant leadership is that people who try servant leadership as a leadership theory or kind of toolkit is that they kind of burn out
Mm,
because now they're spending all their time trying to solve everyone else's problems because they
yeah.
think that that's what servant leadership is, and then they
Yeah.
don't take care of themselves. It
Yeah.
wasn't that. I knew that I knew that I needed to take care of myself so that I could lead by example, but I also knew that I had to spend an equal amount of my time serving my teammate by removing obstacles, by protecting them when they screwed up, by
Yeah.
putting the team's best face forward without taking credit, for
Yeah.
every time we succeeded. Really profound experience for me that carried me throughout my life is like leadership is about often getting out of the way to allow the brilliance of your team to flourish or come forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. I love that. Yeah. Hey, we're almost out of time. I got to get you back another time, but I want to ask you a question. And I don't know if you even have a good answer for this. I think you probably do. But on a couple of your books, I see the wolf.
Right.
And right behind you, you're like staring right at the
Mm.
wolf. Like, what is the symbolism of the wolf for you? I'm just curious.
So I started SEALFIT in 2007,
Mm-hmm.
and I really wanted to, my image of the ultimate warrior was like the Zen master samurai,
Yeah.
like you had alluded to earlier.
Yeah.
It's the warrior who could bring it hardcore. They knew how to all the skills of
Yeah.
combat, of commando combat, special ops combat, but also had the inner practices to develop that sereneness, that calm in the middle of the storm kind of energy, the ability to recover and restore,
Yeah.
and intuition and wisdom. So I started teaching Navy SEALs in my training center, SEALFIT. And this sounds kind of funny, but it reminds me of when Jesus started teaching a lot of his principles, they went over the head of the people he was teaching, and so he had to literally kind of dumb it down, and that's where that's where the parables came from.
Yeah.
And so I had to, I was teaching advanced yoga practices and things that I'd learned, over all the time I spent meditating, and these
Yeah.
SEALs' eyes were like rolling into the back of their head.
Yeah.
So I had to take the foo out of the kung fu. And one of the ways I did that was through one of the ways that I taught um, imagery and positive internal dialogue and emotional power,
Hmm.
developing emotional power, was through this parable of the fear wolf and the courage wolf.
Yeah.
And there's different versions, but I told the story of the Native American elder, who was talking to, the kids about the two wolves who were fighting for their attention.
Yeah.
Right. And the wolf of fear, was residing in the head, and the wolf of courage resided in the heart. And they were constantly fighting for your attention. Your attention was like food for them.
Yeah.
And one of the kids asked, well, which one wins? I mean, if they're fighting, which one wins?
Yeah.
And the native elder said, well, the one that wins is the one they feed the most.
Yeah. I
And
love that.
so feeding the courage wolf means you give the courage wolf all your attention. You
Yeah.
give your heart attention, courage attention, and you starve fear.
Mm.
You don't feed fear, or you don't try to withhold food from fear. You just feed courage.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That
And
makes
so
total sense. Yeah.
my books, Unbeatable Mind, when I was that was my self-published book, and we were just talking about that before we started. So I get to decide what to put on the cover, and I had this this image in my mind of me staring down a wolf,
Yeah.
right? And that's me like staring down the fear wolf, but lovingly staring at the courage wolf and feeding it like a
That's
friend.
awesome. I love it. What a great metaphor to end on. Hey, Mark, where can people find out more about all the great things you've got? Obviously, you've got books, you've got leadership trainings and courses. Where can people find you?
Well, the simplest way is at my website, markdivine, divine.com. And, there's links to, from my books to to the different places. Books are all available at Amazon, of course, and other
Yeah.
places. And then my corporate leadership development is unbeatablemind.com.
Awesome.
And then if someone, is a warrior or wants to challenge themselves physically, mentally in a team environment, we run these intense crucible trainings, which are world renowned at SEALFIT. And that information is at SEALFIT.com.
Well, if you want a good challenge, sign up for one of those. And I've not gone through one, but I've heard about them and they're amazing. A lot of fun too for people that really want to challenge themselves. So books, leadership training, leadership coaching, and then also just the physical aspect through SEALFIT. You're a man of many great ways to help people out, and you got a huge heart. I'm so blessed to have you on this, and I really do want to bring you back again where we talk about leadership and some of the things we haven't got to. But thank you so much for being on, Mark, and also thank you for your friendship for so many years. Really appreciate you.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate you. Hoo-yah, as we say in this.
Hoo-yah. All right.